When placing things in your bathroom, just a couple tips to make sure that you're aware of. We have things like these stall walls, so you can find these in our Revit objects folder, which I showed in a previous video how to access that. Um, some really fun things about this stalls is that you can also click on this and select some other predefined things like handicap stalls, doors on the left and right, and so on. Um, and there's also items like sinks. There's a urinal that's available in the Imperial Library. A lot of things are found in plumbing, architectural, and fixtures. Water closets are the toilets. So you'd want a commercial 3D. Domestic toilets for your house have a water tank. Commercial toilets do not because they're directly hooked up to the plumbing. So that's just why that looks a little bit different. There's urinals in here and a few other things, but those are pretty much the things that you would use, as well as maybe some sinks. But a lot of these tend to be for kitchen. Some of them are a little small, so we have some more useful sinks in Revit objects, and you may find some other things in there that you like. Um, so as far as design goes, though, one thing that you probably want to consider is the amount of space that you have between the door opening here and any walls. So I'm going to dimension this just to give you an example. If I go to annotate and then aligned, you can notice the keyboard shortcut for that. It says is DI. It says align dimension DI. So if I just type the letters DI using kind of that pacing, then it will automatically do it for you. So those keyboard shortcuts can really save you time. So let's see how much distance I have here. If I click that, well, first of all, it's really hard to read this because my scale is not correct. I also can't see my scale because I'm not in full screen. So these are a couple things you want to make sure you do to make it easier for yourself. Click that full screen button on the far right over here. And then your scale might still be 1 inch to 60 feet unless you've shrunk that down. So I'm going to go 1 inch is 10 feet, and that makes it a lot easier to see these. You'll also notice it shrinks down the text for the roads, but that's okay. So 3 feet, 3.5 inches. As long as you're over 3 feet, that seems fairly reasonable. That's 36 inches. That would be like a typical doorway opening. So let's look at the other one. I'm going to hit DI and I'm going to measure this opening here. You can see that's only 2 feet, 8 and 7/8 inches. That's less than 3 feet. It's going to be pretty tight in there. So I might, want to make that a little bit bigger. So rather than moving all of this equipment up, since my building is still under construction here and I'm still designing it, I'm just going to click this bottom wall and I'm using my down arrow key and I'm going to make it so it's just over 3 feet. And I don't need to make that number exact unless that's important to you to do that. If you have specific dimensions, go with those. But you notice a lot of these things are constrained to the walls, and so they move with it. And so that's a really easy solution for my problem right here. I also don't have a lot of excess space. I don't have a lot of excess wasted space in here. So that's also something you probably want to consider when making your bathrooms. You may also want to start figuring out the sizes of hallways. So I'm going to hit DI for dimension. And you'll notice that this is also set to wall face instead of wall center line. That's a really convenient way to connect these so you know the exact dimensions. So right now that is about a 5.5 foot hallway. And for a restaurant, that might be comfortable because you might have people passing each other in here that are going to the bathroom. So I'm going to leave it like that. I like that as my spacing there. So those are some things you might want to consider when you're doing your bathrooms and start thinking about dimensioning things as well. And keep in mind that scale will make it a lot easier to see. And finally, when you go into view, there's an option to make things thin line. I'm going to uncheck this just so you can see the difference. And you'll notice that these lines right here are looking very, very thick. And so thin lines will allow you to see the detail within them. So that's just the last little tip that will make things a little bit easier when you start placing objects.